When a biologist talks about a plant or an animal, they have a taxonomical system. They will describe whether an animal is a vertebrate or an invertebrate, whether it's, a plant, an animal, a fungus, a prokaryote, a eukaryote. There's a whole way of classifying living organisms that scientists have. Likewise, chemists have ways of classifying different kinds of matter. Is it a colloid? Is it a solution, an element, and so on and so forth. Likewise, in linguistics, we have different ways of classifying kinds of languages. Some of them are historically based, and some of them have to do with looking at the language as a system itself. Very quickly, I'm going to look at some of the ways that English is categorized relative to other languages by both historians of language and by linguists. Let's have a look. I'm trying to change the slide. Advance to the next animation. Okay, there we go. So, English is Indo-European, as we discussed and will discuss again. This is the largest group that it belongs to genetically. This is all the languages that are related to English that we can trace connection to are Indo-European languages. And through next week or the week after, we're going to talk about how we trace those connections, the methods we use, how we know that Hindi, which is spoken in India, is related to English. The subfamily is West Germanic. This is like, if you have an extended family, this is the immediate family, the most closely related languages, including Dutch and Frisian and Low German. Frisian is a language that is spoken in the Netherlands. Frisian. There's a saying, good butter and good cheese is good English and good Fries, which is apparently a perfectly acceptable and understandable language in both English and Frisian, which should show you how closely connected that they are. English, we can say, is on a dialect continuum with Scots. That is the language that is spoken in Scotland. And I'm not talking about English with a Scottish accent. I'm talking about the Scots language. Go Google Robert Burns, the poet, and you'll see an example of great literature written in the Scots language, which diverted from the English language over 1,000 years ago, which is why it's kind of hard to understand. African American vernacular English is also on a different dialect of English. It diverted from standard American English 200-300 years ago, and it is a different. In some respects, you might look at it as a different language. The word dialect is not really a scientific word. I had a linguistics professor who once said that a language is a dialect with an army. Scots and AAVE are both in their strongest forms, in their most distinctive forms, AAVE, Black English, right? In their most distinctive forms can be incomprehensible to somebody who only speaks standard English. But there's a range of variation where someone might speak something that's halfway between Scots and standard English, halfway between African American vernacular English and standard English. And so standard English is on a continuum with these dialects. We can also identify other pidgins and creoles and various forms of English spoken that are on a continuum with standard English. For example, Jamaican patois. We'll talk about this more later in the semester when we're talking about global English and the spread of English in various continents and regions. English is one thing that's very distinctive about English, is that English has a huge vocabulary. I mean, it's freaking huge. It has over 1 million words in the dictionary. That is very uncommon. Latin had about 100,000 words. A lot of languages have far fewer words than English. Now, that's not to say that everybody knows all these words. I think somebody with a high vocabulary has an active range of, I forget whether it's 3,000 or 30,000 words I will get back to you on that. But it's I think it's like 30,000 words to somebody with a huge vocabulary. We're talking somebody like William Shakespeare, James Joyce, or something like that. And the average person has a vocabulary of around 3,000 or less. But English has a huge set of words. A huge lexicon is the word that linguists use to describe the whole set of words in a language. Of the words that are most commonly used, the great majority are Germanic. Mother, father, sister, brother, 1, 2, 100, cow, sheep, dog. All these are Germanic words. We also have a lot of words from French. Government, minister, cavalry, all kinds of words, specifically in the realms of government, diplomacy, and military, come from French. We'll learn more. Latin, there's a huge vocabulary store from Latin. If you ever studied for like an ACT or an SAT or something, you know that you learn your Latin roots and your Greek roots too. This goes back mostly to the 16th and 17th centuries, when a whole bunch of words were taken out of Latin and turned into English or coined from Latin roots. It was very popular. We also have a fair few words from Old Norse. And this goes back to the 800s and 900s, when half of England was dominated by Danes who spoke Old Norse. And the thing about Old Norse and Old English is that they were closely related enough to each other that the speakers could kind of understand each other, and some Old Norse words made their way into Old English. And so sometimes we have Germanic words appearing twice in English, like shirt and skirt, both come from the same word. And there's some words from Greek. And then in modern times, as English has spread out across the world, and as English speakers have come into contact in various ways with other language speakers, we've gotten words from Hindi, from Spanish, from German, from Japanese. All different kinds of languages have contributed words or had their words plundered by English. One of the reasons that English spelling is so difficult, and we're going to talk about this next week, is that when we adopt words from other countries or from other languages, we generally don't change the spelling because we don't have any uniform spelling standard system. We'll talk about that more. The last thing I want to talk about is, and this is the most complicated, I think, concept we're talking about. This is a synchronic analysis, not a historical one or a diachronic one. English is usually classified as an analytical language or an analytic language, as opposed to a synthetic or a fusional language. What does this mean? It means the following. It means that the role a word plays in a sentence is largely determined by its order, its position in the sentence. So that, for example, he sees the dog. We know that he is the subject, the thing doing the seeing, because it comes first. And we know that dog is the object, the thing that's happening, that the verb is happening to, because it comes after the verb. Position in the sentence determines role. This is an analytic language. A synthetic language is one where the role is going to be of the word is determined by an ending, right? So in Latin, you can say homo vidit canem, the man sees the dog. But then if you want to say the dog sees the man, you can say hominem vidit canis. Now the words are in the same position, but the endings have changed. And this means that the subject is coming after the verb, even though it's in that position. It has more to do with how the word itself is changed. So Latin word order is a lot more free, but the trade-off is that you have all these different endings that modify it. Old English was closer to synthetic than analytic, but this isn't a switch that you flip from one to the other. This is a slider, right? Farther along towards analytic than English is Mandarin Chinese, which is purely analytic. English has some word endings for like tense, right? We add endings to indicate that a word is past tense. Chinese will just add another particle or another word to indicate pastness. So that's a way of thinking about language and different kinds of language that can be useful. Next week, towards the end of this week, I'm going to post a wrap-up video on our discussion where I talk about your pet peeves and about your theories of language change. That one's not going to be posted publicly. That's just between us here in English 491. And I will be posting materials to help you in next week for the week after that, where we're going to talk about the sounds of English, the English writing system, and we're going to talk a little bit more about synthetic and analytical languages. This was a very brief treatment. Thank you for joining me. Thanks for listening to me. Please hit me up with any questions that you have, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye!